Hi, I'm Max Keiser. This is the Keiser Report. Yeah, we're in London. Fabulous London, city of the future. Stacey.
I don't know about the city of the future, but it is certainly a city that demonstrates a massive misallocation of capital as money continues to pour into property speculation. If you walk around central London, it is a non-stop construction site. And this made me think of this misallocation of capital that we've seen across the West. This is all we have since central banks basically became the economy. We're seeing just in the past week or two, all these big banks. Banks are the ones that are supposed to allocate capital for us. What are they doing? They've all announced massive share buybacks, tens of billions of dollars. So I think that this new crypto space was really, you came up with an interesting thing when you were having this conversation in Paris. We went to see Amir Taaki speak. In the second half, you interview him, but we were sitting outside the event and we were talking to one of his friends called Harry Halpin, who is a cryptographer, and he works with all the old, OG cypherpunks like David Chaum. And he obviously is sort of like from a Bitcoin maximalist background, but he had something interesting to say about this notion of initial coin offerings and why they're actually a good thing. And here's a clip of you on their Periscope with him.
So my explanation of ICOs is that when the bailouts happened, particularly TARP,
yes,
the government essentially gave the dumbest and most conservative sector of society, banks, tons of money. Now what's happening with ICOs is that weird freaks who are into blockchains have basically done a TARP for themselves, a people's TARP, where they've invented their own money, and they basically bailed themselves out. And statistically, it's more likely to lead to innovation if you give tons of money to random crazy people than it is to banks. So that's why I think ICOs are probably actually a good idea for like the global economy and whatnot.
Yeah, TARP for the people. Remember, TARP was the program that they came out with during the 2008 crisis to bail out the banks. And it was approximately $700 billion, I believe. And of course, that got modified over time, became $16 trillion. But this is an interesting idea that Harry comes up with, essentially that we know Bitcoin is a political action. The Genesis block has a highly politicized statement referring to the bailout. And so that is carried through in this thinking that these types of ICOs and crypto coins are the people's bailout, effectively. The people didn't get any of that money. It went right to the banks, and the banks did not lend it out.
They did not lend it out in a productive capacity. That's why we have no more wealth creation that has happened. We have had wealth concentration. These guys have sat on their capital, gave it to their friends who have more than enough wealth and capital. They had no ideas. No new real jobs have been created, just service sort of sector, waitressing jobs and stuff like that. Then we went into the conference. This little talk that Amir Taaki gave at the Maison de Bitcoin in Paris. And he had this other interesting concept that reminded me of, that really fits with this headline out of China. Because Amir Taaki was talking about, he showed a clip from Louis Mumford, who is an American historian and cultural commentator, who was referring about B.F. Skinner, who is a psychologist, who had that idea of conditioned behavior and positive reinforcement, and how positive reinforcement is actually a more terrifying form of tyranny because people think that, they're being rewarded and they think that they're actually having some sort of free choice, and they actually feel like they're creating some sort of better society when in fact it's a totalitarian, maybe authoritarian society. Because here is a headline about that social credit score in China, where it's actually spreading across the world. China's social credit system could interfere in other nations' sovereignty. China's social credit system, a big data system for monitoring and shaping business and citizens' behavior, is reaching beyond China's borders to impact foreign companies, according to new research. The system, which has been compared to an Orwellian tool of mass surveillance, is an ambitious work in progress, a series of big data and AI-enabled processes that effectively grant subjects a social credit score based on their social, political, and economic behavior. Now, we've covered this story, but where this research leads to is that, in fact, it's starting to impact Western corporations, Western businesses, how they behave they have to modify their own behavior in order to access the market and the consumers in China. So this also lends in with the positive reinforcement that B.F. Skinner had pushed, which I'll show.
Yes, B.F. Skinner, he had an amazing insight, didn't he? Because before his work, people were beaten into submission and beaten and tortured to do what the state wanted them to do. And then it was assumed at that time that to get people to act against their own self-interest would be very expensive. You'd have to entice people with huge kind of financial compensation. But what B.F. Skinner showed is that people will act against their own interest for a very small carrot, a nickel, a penny. They'll act against their own self-interest because people are silly in that way. And so China is capitalizing on this with the social networking score. And they're getting people to give away their sovereignty, not that they had any in China to begin with, but they're giving away what remains of it for a score on the social networking, which gives them maybe an extra piece of candy at the drugstore. If they don't do what the state wants, they can't get on public transportation. They get, thrown off the grid. And so, this is now playing out globally because people who want to do business with China, it's creeping into the global business infrastructure. So American corporations that want to do business